Hello, my name is Joshua, and welcome to Survivors to Thrivers. This is an astrology podcast about the growth and change in the astrology from the new moon on January 2nd, 2022 to the full moon on January 17th, 2022. Thanks so much for being here, and let's get started. Great, and so here we are. Here is the chart for January 2nd, 2022. The new moon chart. You see up here that the new moon and the sun, that the moon and the sun are conjunct here in the 13th degree of Capricorn. And over here in the full moon, you can see that the sun has gone from the 13th degree of Capricorn all the way to the 28th degree of Capricorn, conjuncting Pluto here. It's a kind of a significant thing, especially with the sun and Pluto being conjunct the natal Pluto for the United States, which is something that's going to be happening all across 2022 as we continue experiencing these gross cultural changes. And so as we look at the changes between the new moon to the full moon, there's a few themes that are really standing out to me here. So Jupiter, the sixth planet from the center of our solar system. So think about the sixth hula hoop, and it corresponds to the sixth chakra and the number 6, which consolidates on the power that it's able to expand on. So Jupiter, as we're able to concentrate our power, we're able to expand it. And this is in the placement is in the trajectory. It's the degrees it has transited over the first few degrees of Pisces. Jupiter is continuing to restructure our thoughts and our relationship to power, which is further highlighted by themes with Venus. So additionally, Mars has moved through a waning square to Neptune, which corresponds to new meaning for our personal roles and personal directions related to gross cultural shifts happening throughout society. The sun is transiting Pluto during this lunar phase, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning, and that's hugely significant both for the United States and for the world in terms of restructuring, recreating, revealing new beginnings, both at the personal level and the national or individual levels, of how we're transforming our relationship to power and achievement. That's really what this transit is about. And so as we're thinking about power and achievement, new meaning for our personal role and direction, that's both at the personal level and at the national cultural level. And so we think about the gross cultural changes that are happening in the United States and around the world through the United States impact through global currencies and other things. And that idea of global currency is emphasized by Uranus in Taurus, which has been something we've been talking about over the last couple weeks with Uranus's relationship to value and currency. And so there are some shifts there. Mercury is, during this segment of the lunar phase from the new moon to the full moon in January, Mercury is going through the first 10 degrees of Aquarius, illuminated at the full moon in retrograde. And this is helping us recreate our sense of contribution to culture. This will shift a little bit once Mercury gets out of retrograde and then goes over the third 5 degrees in the first half of Aquarius. And then once it transits Saturn in a couple weeks, that's going to be a lot about how we move forward within our new structures. So we're still creating our new structures. So I'll give you a little bit more about this. The axis of the full moon between the moon and the sun, the two luminaries in our solar system. The axis of the full moon on January 17th is the 20th degree of Cancer and the 20th degree of Capricorn, it's emphasizing the illumination of the power of decision and our individual and our gross capacities for inner rebirth and a return to nature. We're deepening our relationship to our own nature, our own humanity, our own nationalism at the national level, individual national character. Pluto has moved almost an entire half a degree during these 2 weeks, which seems like a lot for Pluto, since it takes 248-ish years, Earth years, to do a whole orbit. And this speed of this movement of Pluto, while it's being transited by the sun during this phase of the cycle, and continued separation through retrograde motion of Venus, emphasizes some of the themes that have come up over the last couple of weeks, since Venus has gone retrograde. And it's also emphasizing cultural shifts, and a re-examination of the power dynamic. The power dynamic between personal and collective levels. So how do we as individuals fit in with our greater community, both at at every level? And then nationally, how does being American or the American identity fit in with the greater sense of being a global citizen? And so another thing to mention is that the full moon, one of the bigger, the next phase out of bigger cycles from full moon to full moon, from the full moon on December 18th to the full moon here coming up on January 17th, it's illuminating next steps, how far we've come, and how much farther we have to go, both in our personal missions and our individual/national missions. So since the personal, natural changes, new awarenesses that planted themselves in our personal and national consciousness at the winter solstice, kind of gets a new, oh yeah, we're going back towards the summer solstice, which is kind of what happens over the 3 days when the earth moves, the sun moves like this sets like this over the sky across the year, and is farthest north at the summer solstice and then farthest south at the winter solstice. And it takes 3 days for the change of direction to happen. So as it's coming across towards the winter solstice, it takes 3 days kind of in this stillness spot before coming back across. So indigenous cultures, setting as it comes back across day over day until it gets to the summer solstice. And so what that indigenous cultures throughout the history of humanity have seen the first few days after the winter solstice as the time when they get to identify whether or not the sun is going to come back and go north, because they didn't know, and they didn't really have science the way we have science today to be able to determine and be able to predict what's going to be happening through the natural rhythms and math and telescopes and all the things that we have now in this modern scientific age. But the things about life and consciousness that have always been here are still here. Consciousness is just growing and evolving. So from this, again, full moon on December 18th, just before the winter solstice, through the solstice, and then through the holidays. Christmas is something that I call the equatorial sunrise, because, like I talked about, that coming across the sky, it's opening up the possibility, or it's illuminating next steps for how far we've come and how much farther we have to go, both in our personal missions and our individual national missions. And so that brings me to the end of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope this has been helpful for you. If it has, please give me some likes and some shares and all the good things. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.